Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be explaining the price elasticity of demand, which measures how responsive the quantity demanded is to changes in price. In this video we'll be looking at three types of demand: elastic demand, relatively inelastic demand, and perfectly inelastic demand. Price elasticity of demand is a very important concept in microeconomics because it helps us understand consumer behavior, business pricing decisions, and how the market ends up reacting when prices change. The price elasticity of demand measures how sensitive consumers are to changes in price. If a small price increase results in people buying much less, demand is elastic. And if people continue buying almost the same amount after price increase, the demand is relatively inelastic. And finally, if people continue buying the same amount with the price increase, the demand is perfectly inelastic. Now to look at the formula for price elasticity of demand is a percent change in quantity demanded divided by the percent change in price. One important thing you have to remember is that the answer is usually negative because price and quantity demanded move in opposing directions. When prices go up, quantity demanded usually goes down. However, we normally ignore the negative sign and focus on the actual size of the number instead. If price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, demand is elastic. If it's less than 1, demand is relatively inelastic. But if price elasticity of demand is equal to 0, the demand would be perfectly inelastic, but we will look more into that really soon. This graph right here shows movement along the demand curve. At this point right here, P1 and Q1, the quantity demanded is 40 units, but as the price changes from $1.25 to $1.50, we get to this point right here, which is P2 and Q2. The quantity demanded decreases to 30 units, and this is called a movement along the demand curve, because the demand curve doesn't change, but rather we move along it. This also demonstrates the law of demand, which shows that as the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. There are several types of elasticities we're going to be focusing on. We're mainly going to focus on three types that I mentioned earlier: elastic demand, relatively inelastic demand, and perfectly inelastic demand. These types show us how strongly consumers react to changes in price. Here's the formula for elastic, inelastic, and perfectly inelastic. Elastic demand means consumers react strongly to price changes. For example, imagine the price of fast food increases by 10%. That gives us, and the quantity decreases by 20%. That gives us -2, and then we take the absolute value of that number, giving us a PED of 2, price elasticity of demand. Because 2 is greater than 1, the demand would be elastic. This primarily happens with products with lots of substitutes because consumers can easily switch to other, cheaper options. Inelastic demand means that consumers do not respond strongly to changes in price. For example, let's say gasoline price increases by 20%, but the quantity demanded only decreases by 5%. To calculate elasticity, we need to divide the -5% by the positive 20%. This gives us -0.25. Then we get the absolute value of that, and that gives us a price elasticity of demand of 0.25. And because 0.25 is less than 1, demand is inelastic. This happens because gasoline is considered a necessity for commuting, so people will still need to buy it even if its prices rise. Alright, now let's look into perfectly inelastic demand. This means that the quantity demanded does not change at all when the price changes. For example, imagine the price of insulin increases by 25%, but the quantity demanded changes by 0%. To calculate the elasticity, we divide the 0% change in quantity by the 25% change in price, which gives us a PED of 0. And since the PED is 0, the demand is perfectly inelastic. This happens because insulin is a necessary life-sustaining medication and people can't just stop buying it. They need it. There are numerous factors that affect elasticity. One factor is substitutes. Products with multiple substitutes are usually more elastic as consumers can easily switch to a cheaper product. Another factor is whether a good is a necessity or a luxury. Necessities are usually more inelastic because people still need them even when the price increases. Time also affects elasticity. In the short run, demand is usually more inelastic, but over time, consumers can adjust their behavior and find better alternatives. Like if the price of beef went up, in the short run, people wouldn't just simply stop buying beef. But in the long run, however, they could substitute it with other forms of protein like chicken and pork. So now looking back at our other examples, fast food is more elastic because consumers can easily switch to other restaurants or alternatives like cooking from home. Gasoline is relatively inelastic because people still need transportation even when the price increases. Some people will commute a lot less, but this still won't have a significant impact on the actual demand itself. Insulin is perfectly inelastic because consumers still need to take it regardless of its price. Alright, so to summarize everything, the price elasticity of demand helps explain how consumers react to changes in price. It also helps businesses make better pricing decisions and understand consumer behavior. Overall, elasticity is an important concept for understanding how markets work in the real world. Thank you.